It's Metro Melik. We have another edition of What's the Haps Lansing. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad to be here, and you can't see the shirt, so I guess I don't take it off. I want to thank the Lansing Public Media Center and the city of Lansing for helping make sure that these type of things happen, that we can talk with the cool people and talk about the cool stuff in Lansing. So without further ado, it's Brandon Betz. I know him as City Councilperson Brandon Betz, and this is one of those rare opportunities. I'm going to learn about a person the exact same time you are. Well, kind of, because it's recorded, but anyway, you get the man. So please, who are you? How'd you end up here? Why'd you stay in Lansing? Were you born here?
I was not born here. I'm from Alaska.
You're from Alaska?
Yeah, absolutely. Chased by a grizzly bear one time in my life. One of my favorite stories, moose, all that fun stuff, snow.
Wow.
It's a lot like Michigan. I mean, same sort of weather. I always wanted to move somewhere warmer, but I ended up in Michigan, so whatever.
Doesn't Alaska have they flip long days, long nights?
Yeah. So, I lived in a valley, so for most of my high school years, and what would end up happening is the sun would rise about 10 a.m. and set at 2 p.m. School. So it'd be morning, go to school, it's dark, evening, it's dark, and it was miserable. Of course, the thing is, the summers were just so fantastic when you have the sun out until 3 a.m. and you just sit down. Camping was rough because you could never sleep and you'd have to put blankets on your windows and all that stuff. But summers were amazing. Winters obviously were just so depressing.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, it gets dark at 5 p.m. We're pretty far north, but yeah, it was a different experience.
So, what did your parents do in Alaska? I asked that out of sheer ignorance, and my knowledge of Alaska I learned from National Geographic. So
yeah, well, I mean, there are two major industries in Alaska: tourism and oil. My father chose oil for a living. He's worked for Alaska Pipeline Service Company for a really long time. He's not quite an oil executive, but I hate that I was born and raised on oil money. Whatever. Well, we could talk about that any other time.
Right.
So he's been doing that for a long time. He's in HR. He does special programming. He also flies the drones to overlook and oversee the pipeline, which is really cool. He has FAA license and stuff like that. So he's been doing that over the last couple of years and just loves it. My mom is in hospital administration. She's done medical billing and stuff like that most of her life. She's now a manager. She worked for a tribal hospital for a really long time in Alaska. I'm not sure if she's still working at that hospital or if she's moved somewhere else, but she's working for a hospital system up in Anchorage. So that's kind of my upbringing a little bit. I mean, it was an interesting life, middle class family, sort of just normal everyday stuff. Alaska was fun. I mean, I have so many wonderful stories and experiences, and I'm so glad that I was raised and born there. I think that I learned a lot of really interesting things. So
that's a great adventure. That's definitely on a cool spot to be able to say, hey, there's a lot of adventure. I can't think of a better word for possibly seeing a polar bear and possibly getting bitten by a grizzly bear. So that's awesome. Fishing, wildlife, just all kinds of cool stuff. So cool. So what brought you to Lansing?
A good question. After grad school, I applied to a whole bunch of jobs, and I got one at the state. I worked for the state for about a year in their Bureau of Labor Market Information and Strategic Initiatives. So I was doing labor economic stuff, tracking the unemployment rate and all that fun stuff. Then switched jobs a couple times since then. But the reason why I live in Lansing, I've lived a lot of places in my life. I've moved around a lot, and Lansing just kind of has a good vibe to it. I like the people, I like the trees, I like the houses, I like the bars, I like the food. There's not much to complain about. So I'm just kind of stuck here. Finally, in my new house that I bought,
Congratulations on
So
that. Yeah.
yeah, thanks. And plan on sticking here for a while, hopefully. We'll see how that goes.
I'd be glad to talk to you about some art. I know your partner does art, but I got some photographs that might look good over there on that wall right there.
Yeah, I need something right here.
So do you still work for the state, or is that
No, I work for the Michigan League for Public Policy. I'm a tax policy analyst. My formal graduate studies was in tax economics. So now I advocate for revenue and things like that to fund the services and programs that we need at a state level now. So I work with different coalitions that are trying to, do a graduated income tax to tax the wealthy. I'm fighting against corporate tax breaks and stuff like that. That's kind of what I do for a living now. And everything that I do for the Michigan League for Public Policy is from a racial equity perspective, which is really just a fascinating perspective to look at things, just trying to uplift Black and brown folks through my work, which is, has been really, really powerful for me, particularly, and I love it. I've felt like I've needed to devote my life to something, and this is one of those things that I really appreciate doing. So,
oh, that's fantastic. So you're able to get your passion with your vocation, and passion, vocation, and education. Like you hit the trifecta of being able to make a living out of something that you love doing. So that's cool. Congratulations.
of course, how many people actually love tax policy. One of
Zero?
maybe 3 people in the state. I know 2 others. So.
Because if you're talking to me, no. I pay other people. I'm like, you take all these pieces of paper, then tell me what I need, and tell me where to sign. And ignore my complaining after you figure it out. So you're an East Sider still? Did you buy the house on the East Side?
Yep, living smack dab on the east side on Jerome Street now. I moved a block from where I was living before on Horton. So still on the east side, about 2 blocks from the avenue and the green door, and just been here. I've literally lived within a block of where I first moved since I've moved here.
Oh, isn't that
great?
It's funny how that can happen. I had a similar experience where I kind of dotted around in the same spot and then kind of boomeranged, where I went far out and then just was like, kind of like what you said. It brought me back. It felt like home. It felt comfortable. I lived many years on the east side, and I had very much enjoyance out of it. How do I say this in the most polite way possible? There's been an undertone of change, and it's interesting to watch. And then when I say that, people ask, like, is that positive or negative? I go, no, it's just different. It's the same. Yeah. It's just different. And it's been interesting to see recently, because it's been within the last 5 years that you kind of see a profile that looks different, but kind of the same. But East Side is a cool side. And I very much enjoy the vibe there. Like you said, the green door, things like that. Soup spoon, Fabiano's, these little lovely nuances about what makes Lansing great. So you decided to take on some other things instead of just staying with their job and maybe, playing video games. You decided to go into city council. Like what sane person does that, and why?
Oh, don't get me wrong. I still play video games, but
okay.
That's a different conversation. This is an interesting question. I get a lot, and I've developed an answer over the years, but it's an honest answer. Over the years, it's been a year. I feel like this has been going on forever.
COVID life. It's a long time and a short time at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. This all started. In school, while I was growing up, one thing that it was instilled in me was, helping out my community and doing the best thing and fitting, I can and stuff like that. Politics used to be a hobby of mine. I got involved with, some Democratic politics in Lansing, was part of the young Dems of Lansing and stuff like that. Helped run a couple campaigns a couple years ago. And then city council came up, and there was a seat in particular that we were wanting to run for, or that people were running to run for. Again, this wasn't me necessarily. This was just people that I knew, progressives in the area, were kind of looking around and saying, this is on the east side. This is a seat that would be really good to run, and this, we could actually change the city by running this race and winning it. Now, somebody approached me a while ago and said, hey, maybe you should do this. I thought it was a terrible idea. I am a white male. White males should not run for office. Don't follow my example if you're. That was one thing that really bugged me. I don't think that I represent this side of town as well as somebody who's lived here for a really long time could, and stuff like that. And so I actually searched and asked 5 other people to run for this seat before I did. And I said, look, this is a good seat. It's a winnable seat. You'll have a ton of people supporting you. Money's going to be a little bit hard. We'll figure out how to raise money. But, just kind of put my feelers out there, asked a whole bunch of people to run for the seat. Nobody wanted to do it because nobody wanted to be drugged through the mud. That was the big thing that I heard from everybody. And so finally I said, if nobody else is going to do this thing, it's a winnable seat. I think that it's worthwhile to win. And I think that I could do some good with my educational background, with my, knowledge of how economic systems work, all that stuff. And
I have to ask an unanswerable question. Were these people that didn't want to be drugged through the mud? I mean, did they have so many skeletons in their closet that they were just like, or is it just the vibe of like being under the microscope?
My opponent was mean. I'm not going to say anything bad about her, but truthfully, like, we just knew, things were going to get ugly, and they did get a little bit ugly. There were some things that were said that just weren't very nice, and I think that a lot of people just, it's running for office and getting into this position takes a lot of work. And it's a lot of work that people are willing to do, but it's like that personal effect, like dealing with having negative mailers come out against you that say, terrible things that are true or not true, whatever it is. And, just kind of dealing with those sorts of attacks and all that stuff is stressful and really exhausting. And I think that people just didn't want to deal with that. So,
yes, I can definitely appreciate that under not only just being in the spotlight, so to speak, but under scrutiny, and then a lot of armchair quarterbacks, of course, well, I could do it better, and like, why didn't you run? So I could see that. I've had lots of conversations about possibly getting more involved in that, but it just never fit like what was going on in my life at the time. I'm like, that's just a lot. It takes a lot. And then, there's a toddler in the house, and I'm like, I can't imagine people with children trying to figure out how to navigate through this, especially, the time that it takes away from your home life to add something like that to that. So I commend you for putting your name in the mix, even after trying to not put your name in the mix.
Yeah, I tried hard. I will stick to that story for the rest of my life.
So you ended up running, and what besides not being able to find somebody, like, what was the passion that said, you know what, I'm going to put my name in this?
There are a few lenses that I look through, and I found that the specific lenses that I was looking through things was different than what how council was generally looking at things, and I thought that adding a voice that was looking at the things that I was looking at, which I'll get into in a second, would be useful. The first thing, again, like being from an economics background, seeing how development works and kind of, that general conversation about development was really important to me when I ran, and something that I continue to work on today. Just making sure that we're making the best deals that we can with developers. Because, I advocate for taxes all the time. I want to make sure that our cities have enough money, that our state has enough money to be able to provide the programs and services that our residents rely on. And one of the things that we do really often is we give corporate tax breaks to developers all the time. And one thing that my opponent did very often was just blanket checks to developers, basically. I mean, I can list them off. I don't really want to at this point because we got a lot of stuff to talk about. But that was one thing that was really, from an economic perspective, I was like, there is a better way to be running this city and to be doing this stuff. The other big thing that, of course, is really important to me, again, racial equity is one of those things that I've always looked at and always thought about. And from that perspective, I just, it's not something that council is very well versed on. We've seen over the last year we've had all these conversations with George Floyd's death and Anthony Hulan's death and all of these things that have been going on. And it's just, it wasn't a part of the conversation. And so coming into this thing and just having that lens and having that perspective has been a really, really useful thing on council so far. And, I go back and forth and whether or not I'm effective as a council person, whether or not, I want to run again. Like, these are all questions that are, circling in my head all the time. But one thing that I have noticed since I've been here is that the conversation is changing, I am a leftist. I'm an open socialist. I'm the first open socialist to win a city council election since the 1920s. So, when you have somebody from this perspective coming in, it does change the dynamics a little bit. And, when I talk about effectiveness, am I going to be able to change the city, pass all these crazy things that I want to pass? No, I'm not going to be able to because I'm one of 8, right? But that doesn't mean that I can't be part of that coalition building and really just move the messaging in a direction that I think that we need to do. And I think that that's been pretty successful so far.
So you're trying to not only bring in policies that you feel are better for the city, but change the dialogue as well to help facilitate that in the future. And then you brought up an important point about taxes. I don't complain about taxes in a sense that I want schools to be there. I want libraries to be there. That's a municipality and whatever different way, but it's all basically taxes where like part of the money goes to making a better community. I like street lights, right? So those need to be paid for in somehow, some way. And so, when people complain, I'm like, well, it's either have stuff that makes your life easier, because when it's gone, I'm sure you complain about it, right? Yeah. And then the other thing you mentioned, I find, it's interesting. You bring this up often is the equity aspect of that. Like, what about your up in Alaska white person life made you say equity is important, and you were willing to put your own comfort level aside to be able to say, let's fight for this?
I was, I'll talk to both of those things. I think that one thing that a lot of people are missing that I'm trying to build a conversation around and really have been working on for a long time is that our Lansing city budget is based on the priorities, or should be based on the priorities of the people of Lansing, right? We are paying your tax dollars in the system. You should have a say in where those tax dollars go. And you're right. We need lights, we need schools, we need all that. But what we really need to do is, as a community, come forward and say, these are the things that we want. So one thing that I've been really trying to do is really, really engage. I haven't been able to knock doors this year, but I want to start knocking doors again next year to start having these conversations and teach people how the budget process works so that we can do this stuff in the future. Now, to the racial equity question, I am just some middle-class white dude from Alaska, and I realized that. And I was, how do I put this? Yesterday I was in a conference where a whole bunch of Black Lives Matter activists from around the country were talking about what true allyship looks like. And one thing that they brought up was, I don't know if this is going to answer your question directly, but one thing that they brought up was, nothing has been done by white people without Black people supporting them. And Black people, and also on top of that, society is never going to be free until Black people are free, until liberation has actually happened, right? And I think that we all need to be engaged in this fight for liberation, because it's true that society is never going to be great until Black people can unlock their entire potential and do the work that they need to do. Because again, white people in society are just a product of all these things. We enslaved Black people. We put them through all sorts of, they've been low wage workers, all these things. We got Jim Crow, all these crazy things that have happened over the years. And we as white people just haven't opened our eyes and said, holy, all of this work that we've done has been facilitated by and given to us by Black people and by people of color. And I think that, with that realization in my mind and kind of understanding that perspective, I think that, I need to devote my life to this. There's no way to make society better again until our Black and brown neighbors are lifted up and in an equitable space and able to achieve their potential. And I think that that's just kind of my perspective on this thing. And it's the way that I've thought about this issue for a really long time.
Well, that was a very eloquently succinct way of expressing your feelings on that, and it was kind of refreshing in a sense, because not many people will speak on it in that way and that directly. Often when I'm in situations where that conversation comes up, I am often asked for me to consider another side. And for most of my life, I was like, well, I guess you're right. And I guess it was okay. And now I'm like, nope, I don't have anything to consider. This is kind of crappy. And that's the way it is. And so it's interesting that all the stuff that has happened in the last year or so, and I don't mean anything new has happened. That's not what I'm saying. But with what has happened in this year and put it all in one bucket, has facilitated a blitz of change. Now, my concern is once the conversation wanes, does it continue? And it's kind of refreshing to know that people are demanding that the conversation continues. That will help facilitate change in not only policy, but a perspective of peoples and on all sides. Because I feel like everybody has to understand where it came from, even though they have different effects that happen to them, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same story, but it affected people differently. And we need to understand the history fully on all sides in order to say, yes, this is a real entity. I feel it's like a physical piece of our history that needs to be augmented. So it's interesting that you put it that way. And we have it on recording, so we can save that later, go back to it, study it. So Windows, and I would like to say officially Windows is annoying with their updates. Just want to give another thanks to the Lansing Public Media Center. They've been working with me very patiently with my lack of knowledge on how to hold a conference interview, video conferencing interview. So they're working with that, and they're helping put this together so we can have these kind of conversations. I had a pushback from somebody that said they didn't feel it was necessary to have to interview each council person because I already did one. But you've spoken about things about the East Side that has an East Side personality that I feel is different than the West Side, that I feel is different than the South Side, these different parts. Because I think these different parts, these different precincts have nuances about them, right? Mm-hmm. And then the people, you have 8 people, right, on the council. That's 8 completely different personalities. Like, if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't known about all that Alaska bear chasing stuff. So I think those are important details to kind of figure out where people are coming from, to figure out why they are here, and then how they plan on moving forward. With about 5 minutes left, is there anything I mean, you can take this how you want to take it. Is there anything kind of like auxiliary to being on council that you want to bring up, or is there something that you would like to bring up specifically about council, your role in council, and how that works, and what your idea of trying to make a greatest city that we can be?
You know, how do I put this? I think that, my perspective is a little bit different coming from the background that I'm coming from, and having this perspective of, people being the fundamental piece of power that the fundamental base of the unit of power in the city is a person, is a family, is a household. And I think that one thing that I want everybody to realize moving forward, you can disagree with me, you can agree with me, you can disagree with Peter Spatafor, you can agree with Peter Spatafor, you can agree with Carol Wood, you can disagree with Carol Wood, but the truth of the matter is that you are the one who's in charge. You're the one who should be in power. And, one thing that I've tried to do up until this point is help people realize that I'm just another dude on the east side who somebody was like, or enough people were like, that guy would represent me really well. The things that I'm doing aren't tough. They aren't complicated. I mean, there are complicated things out there, and I'm glad that I'm doing the work that I'm doing, but that doesn't mean that any one person doesn't have any power in this city. Every single person has power. And one thing that I really, really challenge everybody to do is to get organized, to start developing networks, because that's one thing that we're missing in this city. We come home, or we go to work in the morning, we drive our cars to work, we come home, we go into our houses, we close ourselves off, we don't have conversations with each other, and we're not really building community solidarity. And that is the one thing that we really need. And one particular group that's doing really great at this right now is the Black Lives Matter movement. They are putting together community conversations about budgets, about policing, about all these things, about the Breathe Act, and all of these things, and just trying to get as many people together to the table to have conversations about this stuff. Because in reality, again, it's you, the people. It's me, you, everybody else who's listening to this. It's us, the people, who should feel empowered to get this work done. Because again, I'm just another guy. If somebody gives me a call tomorrow and says, hey, I want to pass this bill, I say, okay, are you in my neighborhood? Yeah, great, let's get this done. And then we start building power. We talk about how to get these things done. And also, everybody should feel empowered. I mean, you, Melik, know a lot of things that I don't know about a lot of different stuff. I know that for certain because you're a human being, and I know tax policy really well. But it's like just realizing that, and realizing that every single person in this community is so valuable. I mean, just you putting together this interview and having these conversations is such a powerful thing. And I'm glad that you're doing it. And I'm very excited to see the other council people come on here and talk to you too, because I love hearing the perspectives of everybody. So
yeah, that's fun. You brought up a very important detail that would probably take another 30 minutes to discuss, and we don't have the time to do that, but I want to repeat it sometime. The empowering of the people, and to get people to feel empowered, that they can affect change, and not only within their lives, but within the community of which they live. So thank you for repeating that. Thank you very much for going down a little bit of your history of, where you from, where you been at, who you with. And congratulations to you and yours and the house purchase. I know
Thank you.
That is an important detail, a milestone in life. So congratulations on that. In closing, anything you want to say to the people, your people?
Nope, nothing. I mean, thanks for watching the show. Yep, happy to be here.
All right, happy to be here. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, and I appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to having further conversations with you.
I am open anytime. I enjoyed this thoroughly.
Rock and roll.